Class. Today we will discuss the topic general average. We will understand what is general average and the kinds of general average, and also we will be discussing the four essential elements for an action to fall under general average. Now first let us understand what is average in maritime law. Average in maritime law means the loss or damage which is less than the total in relation to maritime property caused by the perils of the sea. Here, when we are talking about maritime property, it means that the ship or its cargo. There are two kinds of average. One is the general average, and the second one is the particular average. Now, first, let us understand what is general average, when can a general average be declared, and by whom it can be declared, and under what circumstances and situation general average can be declared. Imagine there is a ship full of cargo on its voyage and something untoward happens during the voyage. Now let's say that this untoward incident which happened during the voyage, it could be that a fire was caught on board because the ship was carrying hazardous cargo without declaring it in the declaration form, or maybe the ship gets stranded or grounded due to machinery breakdown or failure, or else the ship gets caught in heavy weather conditions and some cargo on board the ship has shifted due to the heavy weather, which is jeopardizing the stability of the ship, or else any other life threatening situation caused by natural or unnatural circumstances. Now, in such cases, when the entire voyage or cargo or ship is said to be at risk, the master of the ship or the ship owner has a huge moral obligation upon themselves to take a decision with regards to preserving the safety of the ship, the cargo, and most importantly, the crew. Now, here, why I'm emphasizing most importantly the crew is because if the ship is lost or damaged, the ship can be regained back. Or if the ship is beyond regaining and beyond repairs, then a new ship can be built. Similarly, if the cargo is lost or damaged, the cargo can be regained back. If the cargo is insured, then the insurer can claim or he can file an insurance claim and he can reclaim back the lost cargo compensated amount. But if life is lost, it cannot be regained back. Hence, it becomes very important to save the life of the crew members. Now, this will necessitate the master to do something extraordinary in order to save the ship, the cargo, and the crew. Now, what is this extraordinary which needs to be done by the master of the ship? He could jettison the cargo here. Jettisoning of cargo is nothing but throwing out a portion of the cargo into the sea in order to save the rest of the cargo and the voyage. Now, why the master of the vessel needs to jettison out some cargo is because he needs to regain the stability of the ship in bad weather conditions, and also to reduce weight on board the ship or the master. He could make an attempt to refloat a grounded ship, or else the master of the vessel can make a distress call at the nearest port for salvage operation, or else there might be a need to do some emergency repairs to the ship, due to which some cargo may be damaged in the process of repairs. In such cases where the ship and or cargo has undergone any loss, to save the voyage, the ship owner here, he can declare general average. That means if the ship or the cargo, or else if the ship and the cargo has suffered or has undergone any loss, to save the entire voyage, then the ship owner has the right, he is entitled to declare a general average. So now here we understood who is the person who is entitled to declare a general average. It is only the ship owner who has the right to declare the general average, and we also got to understand and learn that under what situation and circumstances can the ship owner declare a general average. General average is a legal principle of maritime law under which all parties who are involved in that voyage shall be asked to proportionately share the losses resulting from such sacrifices. That means all the parties, that is, the cargo owner, the ship owner, the freight, etc. These are all parties in the voyage, including the crew members. They will be asked to proportionately share the losses resulting from such sacrifices. That means the burden will not fall upon one cargo owner, but all the parties who are involved in that voyage will be asked to share the losses proportionately. Now let's understand this concept with one example here. Let's say that there is a ship, and the ship is a container ship, and there are about 100 containers on board with 100 customers, including the crew members. One of the container caught fire on board, as a result of which it spread to 9 other containers, and here the master of the vessel, he had to jettison 10 containers in order to save the balance 90 containers, the ship and the crew. Now, since the ship, the cargo, and the crew were saved due to this action, the whole burden of loss will be shared among the 100 customers and not just the 10 customers whose cargo was thrown overboard. So, with this example, it becomes very clear to understand that all the parties who are involved in the voyage will be asked to proportionately share the losses resulting from such sacrifice. That means general average is based upon the principle that which has been sacrificed for the benefit of all shall be made good by the contribution of all. Now, what is particular average? Particular average is partial loss or damage to a ship or its cargo. Particular average loss are partial and unforeseen loss accidentally incurred by sea perils. A particular average losses is one that is borne by the owner of the lost or damaged goods. Now, some of the examples of average damage are: one is collision, second one is stranding, third one is bad weather condition, and it could also be fire. So, damages resulting from crew negligence or from a latent defect in the hull or machinery also amounts to particular average. Now, particular average is a very simple claim process between the insured and the insurer. So, with this, we understand also what is the difference between a general average and what is the difference between a particular average. In general average, the loss has to be borne by all the parties who are involved in the voyage. But whereas in particular average, the loss is borne by the owner of the lost or the damaged property. Now let's also discuss the 4 essential requirements for an action to fall under general average. The first one is extraordinary sacrifice or expenditure. Second one is intentional sacrifice or expenditure. Third one is for the common safety of all. And the fourth one is they must be a peril. Now let's go to the first one. The first condition for a general average act, that is, they must be an extraordinary sacrifice and expenditure. That means here the expenditure or sacrifice needs to be extraordinary. Now, some of the examples of extraordinary sacrifices where one extraordinarily sacrifices cargo. Like, for example, as we had discussed a couple of minutes back that jettisoning of cargo, that is, throwing some portion of the cargo overboard in order to either lighten the ship, keep the ship afloat, or else in order to save the entire voyage and a portion of the cargo. So, jettison of cargo will include in the general average. Extinguishing fire will also include in the general average. General average will include the damages to the ship or the cargo because of extinguishing fire on board. Now, extraordinary sacrifice, apart from cargo sacrifice, extraordinary sacrifice by freight is also included in the general average. Apart from the sacrifice, one party may spend a lot of money in the common interest of saving the ship and the cargo. So here, freight will be sacrificed when it is payable on delivery of cargo that is itself sacrificed or that sustains such damage that it cannot be carried to its destination. Now let's see what are the extraordinary expenses here. Because when we talked about the first condition, we said that the first condition is the expenditure or sacrifice needs to be extraordinary. So far we discussed about extraordinary sacrifice. Now let's see what are the extraordinary expenses. So apart from the sacrifice, one may spend a lot of money in the common interest of saving the ship and the cargo. As per the York Antwerp rules, these expenditures can also be included in the general average. Now, what is York Antwerp rules here? YAR full form is nothing but York Antwerp rules, which we will discuss in our subsequent lectures. But York Antwerp rules, for a brief introduction here, was first introduced in 1890 and subsequently it was amended several times. It was amended in 1994, in 2004, and the last amendment took place in 2016. So the York Antwerp rules of 1974, Rule 6, very clearly the salvage expenditure, and it is allowed under the York Antwerp rules of 1974, wherein salvage operations can be carried out for the common maritime adventures. Now, as per the York Antwerp rules, as I told you, these expenditures can also be included in the general average, like, for example, salvage expenses, entry to port refuge expenses, handling of cargo to do repairs, detention expenses which are carried out during repairs are all included under the general average. Now, this York Antwerp rules of 1994, they did not allow general, they did not allow salvage expenditure under the general average. But whereas the York Antwerp rules 2004, they allowed salvage expenditure under the general average. Now let's take the second condition for an action to fall under the general average, that is, the loss must be intentional. Intentional sacrifice and expenditure. Let's say that if the ship ran over a wreck and to release the ship, a part of the ship or the wreck needs to be cut away. The expense that is involved in this will not come under general average because this was not intentional. But as I gave you the earlier example, jettisoning part of the cargo to refloat the ship or flooding the water in a hole to extinguish the fire are intentional acts. So, what we understand from the second element is that the intentional act must be done either with the master's intention or his consent. Extraordinary sacrifice and expenses will not constitute general average unless and until they are made intentionally. Now, when we talk about intentional acts, Smoke damage is not allowed in general average, as it is impossible to distinguish between smoke damage due to fire itself and smoke damage due to application of oil. Now let's look at the third element, that is for the common safety of the voyage. First, let's understand the term common safety with an example. Let's say a container ship has few refrigerated containers. The refrigeration system of the ship failed, and the ship had to be diverted to a nearest port for repairing it to avoid damaging to the cargo. Now, will this expenditure incurred by the ship owner in this case come under general average? No, it will not come under general average. Why? Because the action is only for saving a part of the cargo and not for the common safety of the ship owners and for the other cargoes loaded on the ship. For the general average, the action has to be for the common safety of the voyage, or it has to be for the common safety of all. But here what we see that it was not done for the common safety of the voyage, but it was only done for a particular cargo owner. But again, if we take the example, the action of jettisoning some cargo to avoid the sinking of the entire ship, yes, that can be taken as a common safety for the entire voyage. Now let's take the fourth element or the fourth condition for an action to fall under general average, that is, it must give rise to a peril. It must arise in a time of peril. That means they must be a maritime peril. If the master jettisons a cargo to save the ship from sinking, it is a peril. But if the master jettisons the cargo because he feels that the ship is overloaded, it is not a peril of the sea. There is a difference between ship in distress and ship in peril. For example, take a ship that has broken its engine in the mid sea when the weather was calm. Here, from this example, the ship is not in distress, but the ship is in peril. So, what we need to understand here is danger must be substantial and threatening and something more than the ordinary perils of the sea. Because when we discussed Unit 3 also and Unit 4, we discussed in length the different perils of the sea. So, you need to understand the difference between when a ship is in distress and when the ship is in peril. The next lecture of mine will be on how we calculate general average. Thank you.